Okay. Hello, humans. Hello, humans. Burning of the cow in Israel. Um, anyway, taking a few minutes to get some sun here. I had been out cleaning the office up, arranging stuff. We're making progress. A lot of work there, but things are proceeding. So maybe at some point it'll be convenient to use as a studio again. Be able to do some videos. Anyway, so a couple of things to talk about. May is Chemtrail Awareness Month. Now, bear in mind I'm outside. We might get logging trucks and other noise here. So May is Chemtrail Awareness Month, and we're seeing some of the effects of that already, starting to pimp and pump that idea up, along with the pointing out the obvious connection between chemtrails and the flooding in Dubai, that kind of thing, right? Somebody really fucked up when they did Dubai, or it was a hit. You just can't tell, right? I don't think that they're that incompetent, but this shit can get out of control because they're dealing with inherently dynamic systems, which can become unstable very rapidly, with sometimes with minimal amount of extra energy put in inappropriately at the wrong point. So it's just an aspect of unstable systems when you're dealing with that kind of dynamism. Anyway, so in the month of May, send or don't send me any chemtrail photos to my email address. That's not going to do you any good. I'm not going to post these things on Twitter for you. If you don't have a Twitter account, that's fine, but you've got to post them on Twitter and then tag me in the post in order for this thing to be considered, because I'm not going to go to the trouble of doing all this work, and we're just going to automate it and let Twitter do it. So if you can get a following and you can get a lot of people to retweet it or like it, then you stand a chance of winning a gold eagle, right? Because I'm giving away 3 ounces of gold in early June. I don't know how long it'll take me, maybe a few days, maybe a week. But what I'm going to determine is who had the most liked and who had the most retweeted chemtrail photo, and then who had the most retweeted chemtrail video, right? Keep it under 2 minutes because people just won't watch it then that long. And that affects the algorithm on the retweet aspect of it, how long the individual watches it. Okay, so other housekeeping here. If you've got a Kindle device, you may want to go and get it loaded up with a bunch of books to read, on the off chance or the supposition that you might be involved in some level of internet, if not power blackout here this year, and you might just need something to read, right? Or go stock up and get a bunch of books and set them aside and don't read them right away. Just a bit of advice here. It may turn out to be useful. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff out there about the Jew AI as opposed to these other Palestinians. In any event, here's the thing about that. These programs are deterministic, in spite of what individuals like Kerry Cassidy and Patriot Underground and all of these guys will tell you, and Charlie Ward and all these kind of people. AI is not sentient. It can't ever be sentient. It has no desires. It can't make any decisions. AI functions, and I'll tell you this factually, AI functions in such a way that it can only produce results from what is already available to it as its training material. So grasp this. If you were to give me 3 disparate subjects, I could write you a short story about those three disparate subjects. Pick any three objects, and I'd write you a short story about it that would bring out human emotion, okay? That would elicit from you or within you, however you want to think about it, some level of response that you had not anticipated about those three items. AI can't do this. If you give it three items and tell it to create a short story, it can only create a short story within the formats that it's been told that short stories operate in, and from the material that it was used on to train it, and from that material that is within its source material. So it cannot create anything that doesn't already exist within those sources, because it goes and looks shit up. It does not think. There is no cogitation there whatsoever. Now, all of the people that are telling you all of this kind of shit, AI is going to take over your brain and all these kind of things, are just fear mongering, right? And they're very low technical intelligence, so they don't understand that this is not physically possible. But you're going to hear a lot of it, okay, because of what's happening now, and what's going to happen as part of this developing Israeli mistake. And that is relative to AI, battlefields, and all this sort of thing, right? And so the classic example is that AI cannot create, and it cannot discriminate, because it's just software running sensors and some level of devices. It can't discriminate beyond those things that are in its database. So the classic example is the military testing AI. It didn't understand a person walking backwards or another one hopping like a rabbit, this kind of thing, right? And so because it was not within its source material, it could not react to it. It was not even, so it's not ever aware. It's not ever aware of anything. No AI is aware of anything. And so because those actions were not within its within its database of parameters, they were completely ignored, completely unseen by the AI. So the soldiers were invisible to the AI as they went on up and destroyed it. And all they had to do was go touch the pillbox or the machine or something in order to prove that they had done it. And so the AI producer people, so that's the main story. It gets leaked out into the press. This is years old. And so now the AI people say, well, they've got this solved, and they've got that solved, and they've got this solved. The problem is that the way that they're solving these things is what's known as brute force, right? What they're basically doing is trying to cram in and build a database of such massive proportions that they have all the options covered. Which is really stupid, and they have to do it that way because you can't make a computer sentient and self-monitoring, right? It just doesn't happen. So and I've worked in AI languages since Prolog in the 1980s. Logging truck, hang on. Looks like a 50,000 pounder. Anyway, so over these next few months, you're going to hear a whole lot about AI. Just a second, another one. Anyway, a lot of this stuff that's coming out is like prep material, right? They need to shift the understanding of the normies from one level of grasp of our particular environment here on planet Earth, and they've got to shift it over to the point where they understand that we're now in sci-fi world, because a lot of people don't grasp this, all right? So right now, most of the normies are going to consider themselves, it doesn't matter if they think the Earth is flat or the Earth is round, they're going to think of themselves as living in this little biospheric boundary on the surface of the Earth, right? And so their enemies are going to be, because of our biology, their enemies are going to be their enemies are going to be conceptually within their minds at their height and observed horizontally. So if you're thinking yourself about, if you think Israel is your enemy and you consider this in your mind, you will probably grant me that when you think about it, wherever you are on this planet, you think about Israel, your enemy, and there's like this mental tracery that would have a line going from your thought over to Israel horizontally or around the around the curve of the earth to reach that point. So basically, in other words, you look at your enemy from the height and the perspective of your eyes. And this has to change because in sci-fi world, your enemy can come at you from directly above, right? Someplace we don't look. Or from behind you, or from, theoretically, if you want to think about it that way, which I don't, these interdimensionals, right? I can explain some of that, but in any event. So in sci-fi world, which we're emerging into here through hyper-novelty and through these next couple of years, we're going to have to consider ourselves in a much more dangerous environment and truly at a much more increased level of paranoia. Just to keep going and get through it, okay? And to like settle into it. But they have to educate the people. They have to bust the paradigm of threats are only at the surface level of the earth. So you're going to hear a lot of stuff about threats from under the water and threats from up in the air. And we're seeing a lot, of course, with the, Dubai, with the Judus getting Lahaina and Paradise Valley, Judus or otherwise. Hang on a second. So Judus are otherwise known as Jewish space lasers, and they're probably operating out of C-130s, some form of that. In any event, though, so you're going to hear a lot about this over these next few months because it's the attempt of the SOC to prepare the consensus for a different view of ourselves relative to our risk matrix, right? The threat matrix around us, because we have to start thinking about things in a radically different way as they bring in and introduce the alien reproduction vehicle stuff. Now, there may indeed still yet be battles between the deep state offspring, I guess you'd call them, of rogue corporations and the developing power base that is the SOC. And so we may see some bizarre shit go down over these next probably 11 months, 12 months maybe, relative to UFOs, UAPs, corporations, and governments, and nobody getting along with anybody else, and obvious tells that there's some kind of a backstory that we're not being informed, right? So it'll be murky. Let's see what else do I have here. Okay, so the chemtrails, my contest is obviously to get as much promotion on the idea of chemtrails and get as much out there into the normies so that they start talking about it. So as of June 1, I'll start doing that. As of May 1, the contest is open. You post a chemtrail picture or a chemtrail video, and then try and get as much in the way of likes or retweets as possible. And at the end of the month, we'll tally and see who had the most, and they get the coins. Now, as far as chemtrails, here's something that a lot of people won't consider. Just a second. Okay, so how do I want to? Okay, so I'm a military brat, right? My dad was in the Army, 101st Airborne. There's a saying that, like if you're a woman married to a guy in the Army, you're in the Army, right? If your father's in the Army, you're in the Army. And that's just the way it is. So as far as I'm concerned, my first 17 years, I was in the Army. I grew up in the institution of the Army. You meet a lot of people in the process of growing up like that, and Sometimes you hang on to these associations even though the Army moves you all the way around the planet from each other. In my experience, a lot of times you do return to bump into each other because the father's on a compatible career path, right? So my dad was doing logistics, where this other guy was doing command and control stuff. And, then later on, my dad did command and control stuff, and this other guy had been doing some aspects of logistics. But they ended up at the same base. So, I would hang out with the kids, and then we'd be separated by the military for 3 or 4 years. They may go to Japan, we might go to Europe, that kind of thing, right? And anyway, though, so as in the normal course of events, crossing 70 years of time, so it just turns out that some of the cohorts that are left from my youth were more friendly to me than enemies. I've got some of those old enemies still alive too, but that's another issue. Anyway, but I was talking to a guy I hadn't talked to for a long time, and we went into some really deep shit. And he had a life and career path that was somewhat similar because we both had a technical bent. And he's 5 years older than me, so he's 76. Anyway, so he had some things to say because he went into a technical work that was basically in the subcontracting world directly for the military, whereas I had subcontracting work for major technical corporations, mostly about software, who then may have had dealings with government, but I wasn't doing the direct stuff, right? It wasn't like I was working for a military defense contractor per se. I was 1 or 2 steps removed because I was always doing subcontracting work for somebody else who was a subcontractor, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so this buddy of mine, he went into technical work. I haven't talked to him for, 15, 20 years. No, it was 21 years. And he went into technical work, but he went into the technical development on a firmware and hardware basis that was in classified industry kind of shit, right? So I wrote code that ultimately was classified, but it was kind of after the fact of me writing it. I never signed on to a classified project at the beginning. So there was only 2 instances of that where code that I'd produced was deemed that it shouldn't get out, right? And it's really stupid for the reasons too. But in any event, so this buddy of mine, he goes into classified business, and that's really to a certain extent why we didn't maintain contact as adults, even though we were both technically minded and blah 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 and had all this, is because a lot of his work was indeed at a deeper or darker level. Doing all this classified shit. But anyway, when we reconnected the other day, he was laughing, joking about my chemtrail contest, and he said, he's gonna set up a camera on his roof and let it and automate it, and he'll win one of the coins. Hang on a second. He lives in an area that's heavily chemtrailed. We were talking about the health effects, especially on old people. Not good. I gave him some tips. We'll see if it helps him. He's 76 and not doing well. Anyway, though, he was telling me that there's this hidden subcomponent that he knows the military is aware of because he wrote software to control sensors about this very idea. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything that would betray this guy or give away too much as to who he is. But anyway, the sensors were following a non-EMF signal, kind of a energy in order to trigger them. And when they were triggered, they went off and told the software XYZ, and then he wrote the software and what it did about it. But basically what he was saying was, in that project that he was working there, he came across the thought. This was not that long ago. Okay, so I retired in 2018, and he more or less retired in 2011. He did one other job after that as a subcontractor, but he was just burnt out and had health issues after 2011, so it just wasn't doable for him. Anyway, though, so his knowledge prior to 2011 included this little tidbit, and that is that the military is aware that there's a significant possibility, like a known probability. Okay, so that's how they think about it. A known probability of disruptions of computers at and damage at a chip level from solar events, and that this is one of the reasons that chemtrails are structured as they are. Not one of the reasons necessarily that they're doing the chemtrails, right? But every time they do anything, they always pile shit on. And so, and they use the extra, hang on. They use the extra things they can do as leverage to help sell these weird-ass, goofy ideas. But anyway, so my buddy was telling me that, prior to his leaving that employment, there was a real concern on the part of military that there could be a solar event and, global civilization to some extent would be wiped out. But what really freaked them out was this idea that the military thinks of us as on a globe. And so it's not true that the military is operating on a flat earth model and they're not telling you this. But the military thinks of us on a globe. And so imagine this idea, that if the sun were to pop off a solar flare, some of the things the military is worried about much more complex than the solar flare idea. But nonetheless, the concept comes across the same way. And it is emitted towards the earth, only a portion of the earth from about 1/3 of the earth would get direct blast from whatever the fuck it was, depending on where the earth was in its rotation would depend on whether or not you got totally wiped out. And then there would be another 1/3, so this is in rings, in a very, very spherical kind of a sense, so that 1/3 of the sphere gets a big blast and all the computers are really fucked. And then there's another third around there that would be severely damaged to the point that they wouldn't be operational, there wouldn't be networks, all the satellites and everything in that whole area would be taken out, yada, yada, yada. And that we know this because of the time trouble and so on that the military goes to with satellites relative very, very rapidly. Anyway, though, so the idea that the military had to wrestle with was that if such a thing should occur, that there was this, because we were becoming increasingly digitized and increasingly dependent on these devices, that if such a thing occurred, civilization would, but it would be even worse than that for them, because along the way, it wouldn't go Mad Max, but what they were saying, I think it was, would Tonga rule the world? Okay, so the idea was that if the solar flare hit when Eurasia, the greater part of China, Russia, and all of that mass into Europe was facing directly at the sun, it would wipe out all the production facilities for computer chips and all of this kind of stuff. And so only those places in the far South Pacific on the other side of the planet would survive with their computers intact, and therefore would Tonga rule the world. So anyway, the military does have some sense of humor about their doomsday stuff. Anyway, I actually think I'd like to live in a world ruled by Tonga. It'd be better than the shit we've got now. Anyway, though, so my buddy was saying, so there is that aspect of it, that if we do away with chemtrails, so the military is also of the opinion that my buddy is, that he was working on a project that suggested to his mind that the military is worried about gradual degradation, that if they didn't have chemtrails, it'd be this gradual degradation even without a major solar event, just because the kind of continuous basis. So there is that to contend with. We may not be able to effectively get rid of them until we do something about hardening the chips and have that discussion. Wow, getting busy today. Okay, so I've had my son, I've had my say, and I'm going to head in and see if this works. I had previously dumped a whole brand new cup of hot tea on it. So I don't know if this fucker is recording or not. Anyway, I'll find out. Talk to you guys later.